If your blood runs orange and blue, this is the pod for you. You're listening to Orange and Blue Bloods, hosted by EJ Stewart and Tommy Beer. Let's get to it.
But let's move on to some important news in the NBA. So the NBA and the Players Union came to terms on a new collective bargaining agreement that includes some noteworthy changes to the league moving forward. A new deal is expected to be ratified this week. So one of the big additions includes the inclusion of a NBA in-season tournament that will be included into the regular season. So teams will still play 82 games. The team that plays the championship game will play 83, but that won't count towards the record. The event will include pool play that will then be followed by a single elimination 8-team tournament. The Final Four will be held in a neutral site. Right now, it sounds like Las Vegas will be the leaders in the clubhouse as of right now in terms of where this Final Four will be played when it comes to the in-season tournament. The winners of the tournament, the coaches and the players, all each will get $500,000 as a reward for winning the tournament that's going to be included in the NBA regular season. So there's that. There also will be some new restrictions for the teams that exceed the highest luxury tax threshold. So right now, that's the Clippers and the Warriors at this point. Teams that blow past that new salary cap apron that's $17.5 million above the luxury tax line. Those teams will have a bunch of restrictions that include being unable to sign players in the buyout market, unable to use the taxpayers mid-level exception, can't attach cash to trades, can't trade draft picks at 7 years and beyond, and plenty of other things as well. You can't take in more money than you're sending out. So some pretty harsh restrictions for teams that hit that highest luxury tax threshold. There'll also be some new spending and trade opportunities for teams who aren't in that threshold. Both teams that even at the luxury tax, especially for teams that are below the salary cap and above the salary cap and not hitting the luxury tax threshold. So bigger opportunities to change your roster if you don't hit those high-end thresholds. In an effort to keep star players on their respective teams, franchises can now offer max extensions of 140% raises from your previous salary. So essentially that's a 20% increase. So players like Jaylen Brown, players like DeMontis Sabonis, these guys could get more money to re-sign with their teams if they do so. And one of the other things I thought were important, you can now have two more max slot. You have more than two players on your team as super max guys, which Tommy talked about when it came to Cleveland, who will have to re-sign Evan Mobley coming up. And to curb load management, players will now be required to play at least 65 games to be eligible for regular season awards like MVP and all NBA teams. So I think for a lot of people, we've talked about the importance of making the regular season matter. So I guess we'll start there, Tommy. Do you see the in-season tournament? Do you see the new requirement for the regular season awards? Do you see that at all helping improve the competitiveness of the regular season and curb load management?
I'm not excited about the in-season tournament. I could be wrong. Adam Silver and company have done I wasn't sure about the play-in tournament. It has been a huge success on so many different levels. So I was wrong about that. Maybe I'll be wrong about this as well. It'll be fun. It'll be exciting. It'll be somewhat interesting. But I don't think just having strictly money on the line is going to motivate players to in this day and age, these millionaire athletes to go crazy and put a lot of, a lot at stake on these tournaments. But the thing I really do like is the tying at least 65 games played to the regular season awards. I think that'll go a long way in the load management, because it's not so much load management for the other guys on the roster. It's if Giannis comes to your town once a year, you want to, when the Bucks play, you want to see Giannis. If Philly comes to your Western Conference team, you want to see Embiid play. So it's that type of stuff that I think it'll be less common, and that's a good thing for the game.
Yeah, I definitely like the regular season award requirements, because to me that's how it should have always been. When we've seen guys, I mentioned with All-Star games, guys don't play a lot of games and also find a way to make their way onto the All-Star team. So that with Paul George this season. And I think while I think it's important to note that a lot of the load management stuff comes from teams, it's not necessarily players coming around saying, hey, I need a day off. A lot of times it's a team saying, hey, you're not going to play. I do think it'll be a lot harder for teams to convince guys to sit when these guys are up for MVP, Defensive Player of the Year, making an All-NBA team. These are important notes. These are things that some of these awards impact these guys' money.
Yep.
And it kind of becomes an interesting deal with like kind of what we see in the NFL, where meeting certain thresholds can mean certain bonuses, and players get upset because maybe they don't get the ball on the 1 yard line when they need another touchdown to hit a certain threshold. So that's going to make it a lot more interesting. There may be even more contention among certain teams if we get close to a situation where guys will be ineligible to play or to win an award because of load management. So I think that that's a good thing. I like the in-season tournament. I do think that I wish there was something better on the line besides $500,000. I think that that's a lot of money. I think that teams once they get to the Final Four, like they're not going to want to lose. I think they will play relatively hard, but I wish it would have been something that made it an incentive, especially for the teams maybe who aren't that great or teams that aren't teams that are going to win championship, to also like go for it, because maybe you give them an extra lottery pick. Like I thought, like to me, the best thing would have been to like, if you win the tournament, you get the like middle of the odds lottery as an added pick in the draft. And like to me, like now every team's gonna be into that. The teams that are the lower end teams, like they have a shot because it's not necessarily playing an 82 game schedule. You just have to play good for a couple of weeks. Like I think that would have made it more interesting. I also think maybe guaranteeing a playoff spot would have been interesting, because maybe that would have turned the season upside down if a team that has been one of the worst teams in the league wins the tournament and now they have a playoff spot and now there's one less spot, kind of what we see in March Madness with the bid stealers.
Right.
That happened in the conference tournament. So I thought there was some more creativity they could have had. I think that stuff will come. I don't think they want to turn everything upside down so quickly. So that's why they start with money. But I think those other things will come eventually. But I'm cool with the single season, the in-season tournament. I'm interested to see how they're gonna figure out the schedule to make it to where every team still plays 82. That'll be interesting to figure out. But I think that that's a cool addition. What did you think of the stuff with the money and the taxpayers? I thought that was actually one of the more interesting things, because some of these teams like the Warriors and the Clippers are gonna have to make like decisions like next year. like they're gonna have to cut salary almost immediately, because some of these restrictions are extremely harsh. It's gonna be very hard to build rosters if you hit that threshold.
Yeah, I'm okay with it. I don't have a problem with it. I like kind of squeezing teams in the middle, increasing competition and parity and all that stuff. As we know, obviously, when KD went to the Warriors, I don't want to say it ruined the NBA for 2 years. That's far too strong a word, but there really wasn't competition. It happened to coincide with the salary cap spike coming from the new deal. The other thing to mention, in the new CBA, is they're balancing, they're leveling that out, so it's not one specific. It's not 1 year where it's going to spike from 1 year to the next. So that'll prevent kind of the that crazy year when we had Mozgov and Joakim Noah.
Yeah, I would say just prevent the Knicks from doing another Joakim Noah deal, because that's something that still haunts
and
me.
or the Lakers giving 144 million to Mozgov and Luol Deng and
yeah.
craziness that followed. The one other thing I do want to mention, two things actually. One, I think you'll agree with, the All NBA eliminating positions. I have a problem with.
I don't like that. Yeah.
For the 75-year history of the league, we've been able. The All NBA team has been an important measuring stick in terms of greatness and Hall of Fame resume. That's no longer going to be the case. I assume you're on the same page as that.
Yeah, I don't like it because all these moves seem to go against centers, and I don't think that centers are not important in this league. And actually, they seem to be on a new renaissance. Quite frankly, I mean, the two leading candidates for MVP the last 2 seasons are centers essentially,
Right.
and so like I don't really get that. I think they should have kept it the way it was: 2 guards, 2 front court players, forwards, and then make it a center. So I didn't really love that. I agree. One of the other things I also thought was interesting that I saw this come across, and I really thought it was an April Fool's, and I was always afraid to even talk about it still, but it is a thing that players now be able to invest in NBA and WNBA teams. They can also invest in gambling and cannabis companies. Cannabis companies I care nothing about. The gambling is a little interesting. I'll hold reservations about whether or not that's a big deal yet, but the investing in teams thing seemed pretty crazy, because like I didn't see anything from Sham saying that it had to be your own team. Even if it is your own team, like how does that impact free agency? Like, will guys be able to have the carrot of saying, hey, you sign with my team, we'll give you 5% investment stake? Like, how does that work? Like, that seemed crazy to me. Now, I like the fact that NBA players can invest in WNBA teams. That seems cool, but the investing in NBA teams thing sounded very weird, because there wasn't much details outside of that they can do it.
100%. I need to see more on that. I agree. That was odd. I'm not sure how, because there's a lot. There have a lot of rules in place now, so teams and players can't collude to circumnavigate the salary cap. In other words, you can't sign Kevin Durant to a minimum salary contract and then give him 25% of your franchise. So you can sign 10 guys to 10 other guys to value exceeding their contract. So there's a lot. I'm not sure how they're going to work that out. I guess we'll just have to wait for further details. And the gambling stuff, I think there's going to be. They've gone from pretending gambling doesn't exist to now they're completely in bed with the gambling companies. Every other commercial on MSG is FanDuel.
Yeah.
They're on the floor, on the uniforms, the arena names. It's gone to the other extreme now. I think there's going to be a swing back to the middle because some players going to get caught up in the Calvin Ridley situation where they're, innocuously betting on games, but are betting on their own teams. You really, really got to be careful. Because and the reason teams and the reason owners took the Calvin Ridley suspension was so strenuous was because the one thing you can't have is fans questioning the integrity of the outcome of a game.
Yeah.
Once that comes into question, and even if it comes into question a little bit, really, really impacts fans getting invested. The one other thing I'll say about the CBA stuff, and I think the most important, and to kind of wrap up the conversation from the previous segment, is the increase in the franchises offering an extension of 140% of the player's current salary.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be enormous in how the Knicks construct this roster going forward. First and foremost, Josh Hart. Does that now enable the Knicks to sign him to a 4-year, 3-year something extension this offseason, instead of him opting out and then hoping that you re-sign him when he becomes an unrestricted free agent? Even though the best laid plans, Hart loves New York loves Hart.
Right.
Don't worry, I'm going to opt out because my agents are telling me that's what I have to do, but I'm going to come back here. And then Portland offers him $70 million. The Knicks can only offer him 40. There's just a lot of stuff that can get in there you want to try to avoid, but not only Hart. Jalen Brunson. Jalen Brunson has a player option on the final season of his current contract.
Yeah.
He will obviously, of course, opt out unless he's willing to sign the Knicks, sign him to the max that they can offer via an extension, which would have been far too less, 6 days ago. Now with that 140%, maybe that's enough to talk him into, with an increasing salary cap, another reason why I'd want to opt out. But maybe that's enough to convince him, because clearly he's benefited from the New York situation. New York has benefited from his presence. They'd like to stay together. His coaches, his father's on the coaching staff. Maybe that's enough to kind of reduce the incentive to hit unrestricted free agency. So those are things that kind of were bylines and little small bullet points, but could have a huge impact on two very important players on the Knicks.
Yeah, that's going to be a very important thing to follow on how that impacts some of the Knicks negotiations with some of their own players. But that's going to do it.